everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how I've been making my spiral sweaters. I posted my spiral sweaters on some crochet Facebook groups and as well as TikTok, and I'd gotten a lot of requests for a tutorial, but I use the word tutorial very loosely because this is the most free-handed project that I have ever free-handed before. So I don't want to claim that this is like a perfected pattern or anything. This is a more of a fake it till you make it type of project. So you might even want to skim through the video a little or watch it at 2x speed before you decide to commit to this video as a spiral sweater tutorial. I know that at the time that I'm filming this, there is one other spiral sweater tutorial on YouTube, but it is a different style of sweater than mine, which is why I freehanded mine, because I wanted my own version of it and my own fit. And there are just spiral stitch tutorials in general that will show you how to make the spiral effect, but not necessarily how to turn it into a sweater. So it's definitely up to you to decide which tutorial or video to follow will be best for your style. But I just wanted to make it clear before we get into it that this is going to be a pretty casual tutorial. I don't normally like to have talkative intros like this before I do a tutorial, but I just wanted to clarify that before we start. But I do want to say that this tutorial is going to include all sizes. It's going to show you how to make every single size. So let's get started. So I am using weight for acrylic yarn, specifically Big Twist, in the colors Ivory and Coral. If you have skeins that are similar to this size, then you'll need 2 of each color. My Ivory is obviously a big skein, so I only needed 1 of it. But if I had Ivory in one of these size skeins, then I would have needed 2 Ivories as well. In total, it's about 1,400 yards of yarn. After completing a size large sweater, it weighed 536 grams. And if you divide that by 2, so you know how many grams of each color you need, that was 268. So about the same amount of yarn as any other sweater. And I am using a 5mm hook. On this project, both yarns are going to be attached to the project at the same time, all the time, until we finish doing the spiral sweater panel. So try to keep one color on one side of you and the other color on the other side of you at all times. Luckily, we never have to turn our work in this project because we are always going to be crocheting in a circle. So to start off the spiral, you're going to take whatever color you want to be your first color, which it doesn't matter design-wise, but you'll just remember that that's your first color because you'll keep returning back to it. And we are going to chain 4 and slip stitch back into the first chain. If you are the type of person that likes to do magic rings, then you can go ahead and do a magic ring. I never do magic rings in my tutorials, so if you're a non-magic ring person, then this is the method that we're going to be using. And then that's creating a hole in the middle where we are going to start working into. So I'm going to show with my needle. We're going to be working into the complete middle of the circle that we basically just created. We're not working into the same stitch that we just slip stitch into, because that's going to look like it's a nice hole that you can go into. But we want to be working in the middle right now. And we're going to go straight into a double crochet. It's kind of hard to go from a slip stitch to a double crochet, so go slow. Especially right here. There we go. And then one more loop. And in total, we are going to be making 6 double crochets, including the one we just made. So that's 1, 2, and we're crocheting over our tail. 3, 4, 5, 6, and we're going to take a break from the white, so we're just going to pull this up so that we don't lose it. And you're going to grab your second color. And we are going to put our hook back through our hole that we were working into and pull this tight and pull the yarn through the hole, but then just go straight into a double crochet once again. And now we're going to try to crochet over both of the tails. So double crochet into the middle hole, again from kind of a slip stitch, so a little tricky, okay. And you can pull this over if you need more room, because we're doing 6 of the second color as well. So that was just 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you will use the tail of your first color, which mine is the white, and pull the center tight and close so there's no more hole in the middle. Looks like a bow tie pasta right now. And we can lose both of the tails since we've just crocheted over them. And since we have 2 yarns going already at the same time, we don't want to have any more yarn distractions. So now we're going to pull this up and go back to our first color. And we are going to double crochet into the next stitch. It's a little hard to see the next stitch because of how we went from a slip stitch to a double crochet. It's making that stitch kind of lean sideways. So if you're not really sure where that stitch is, you can count backwards from over here, because you know that we did 6 double crochets. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we are going to double crochet twice into that. And we are immediately going to start using stitch markers. So you're going to want to put a stitch marker in the first double crochet that you just did in that increase. We are now going to double crochet increase into all the remaining stitches of the second color with our first color. Just like we just did here, we did 2 double crochets into 1 stitch, and we want a total of 12. So this was 1, 2, 3, and then back in that same stitch, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then pull this up so we can start working on the other color again. Pull that one tight. And we're going to be doing the same thing, so don't forget that if you're confused about where this starts or where the first stitch is, you can count backwards from before the stitch marker. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This little sideways one is where it starts. So we want to double crochet in there twice. 1, 2, and put a stitch marker there as well. And do our 12 double crochets of increase in the next 6 stitches. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And now we want to go back to our first color. Every time we start a new round, we're always just going to go back to our first color, even though it could make sense to just keep going with the color you're doing. It just, in the end, will make you less confused if you go back and forth. So let's remove that stitch marker. And we're going to put 2 double crochets in the first stitch again. We're gonna start pretty much every row like that. So 1, 2, and then put your stitch marker back in the first one that you did. And then we are going to have 1 regular double crochet in between increases this time. So we did 1, 2, that's an increase. Now we just want to do 1 double crochet in the next stitch. And then in the stitch after that, we are going to do an increase again. In the stitch after that, it's just 1 double crochet. In the stitch after that, it is an increase again of 2 double crochets into that stitch. The next one is just a double crochet, and then it is an increase. And this should end up with 18 stitches in this row. And then your last stitch is not going to be an increase. It's always going to be just like the number of regular double crochets that you were doing in between. So this time it's just 1 double crochet at the end. And we're going to pull that and pull this one tight and do the same thing for our second color. Take out the stitch marker and start with an increase and put the stitch marker back. And then do a regular double crochet and then a double crochet increase every other stitch. Regular double crochet, increase. And then in all the rows after this, it will become even more obvious where you do increases because you're going to be doing them above the space where you've just done them in the previous row. Right now, it's not super easy to tell unless you're very used to looking at increases, because in the previous row, we only did increases. So it looks like every stitch we're going into is an increase. Technically, we're always going to be increasing on the right side, like the right stitch of the increase in the previous row, but that might be a little too complicated. So you could just wait until the next row to start using that trick. And pull that out. Now we're going to go back over here, pull this tight, remove our stitch marker. Like I said, always start with an increase of double crochet. And then put your stitch marker back in that first stitch of the increase. And now we are going to have 2 stitches in between every single increase, 2 double crochets. So this was an increase that we started with. I just did 1 double crochet. And then in the next stitch, I'm doing another double crochet. And the stitch after that, I am doing a double crochet increase. And this is what I was talking about, where you can see that you're crocheting over where we did an increase in the last row. Here's a regular stitch from the last row, a regular double crochet, and here is an increase. And every time we approach an increase, we're going to be doing an increase again. So here's 1, 2, and then 3, 3. That's how I like to count this type of pattern of increases. 1, 2, 3, 3. And that's actually how I'm going to be referring to all the rows from now on. Like, I will consider this to be the 3rd row or the 3 row, even though this is technically now the 5th row that we're on, because we had 1 row of doing the foundation double crochets, 6 of each color. We had the next row of increasing all of them, and then we started doing the 1 and then the 2, and now we're on the 3. But from here on out for the rest of the project, I mean, it's hard to tell what row you're on. You can't just count rows while you're looking at it as it spirals, especially when it gets bigger and bigger. So that's how we'll tell what row we are on so that everyone's on the same page. It's going to be the row that we are counting 1, 2, 3, 3. That's what I would consider the third row. And then at the end, I've just done an increase, and we end off with 2 regular double crochets at the end. Like I was explaining before, you're always going to end off with the number of double crochets that you are putting in between increases. So now we are going to pull our first color away and tighten our second color and do the same thing for our second color, starting with the double crochet increase, putting our stitch marker back, and putting 2 double crochets in between increases. Here's an increase, and then here's 1 double crochet, 2, 3, 3. And even though as you go on, you'll be able to tell where to put increases because you'll see the increase from the previous row, you should still count, or at least try to count, or at least at the end of every row, count to make sure you've done the right number. Because if you miss an increase in a row, in any row, then the math becomes hard and it's hard to fix. If you catch that you've missed it in the previous row, like if I were here and in the previous row I hadn't increased right here, but I knew that I should have and I could see that I missed it, that is okay to fix, because then you would just increase again. You would put 3 double crochets into one spot. Let's say if I didn't put that increase there, because that gives you the right amount of stitches at the end. So it's easy to catch in the next row, but once you get past the next row and you still haven't figured out that you've skipped a stitch, if you figure it out way later, it's going to be harder to fix and you'll probably just have to go back, or you'll have to not care so much about the math not adding up. Now here I am approaching my stitch marker on that same row, and I'm ending with 2 regular double crochets. And we pull that out, and we're always going to rotate the product back this way so that we're not twisting the yarn around. You don't want our yarn to get tangled with them both being on the project at the same time. We are going to remove our stitch marker and do the same thing. We're always going to be doing the same thing except adding 1 stitch in every row. So we start with our double crochet increase and put our stitch marker back. And now there's going to be 3 double crochets in between every increase. So here's 1, 2, 3, and then an increase is 4, 4. So then I would call this row 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. Oops, I missed it. 4. Just did that all the way to the end, and I'm going to pull that out and start working on my second color and doing the same thing. Take out stitch marker, double crochet increase, put the stitch marker back, and double crochet 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. now I'm ending with 1, 2, 3. And that's the pattern that we're going to be following for a good couple more rows. So going into this next row, I won't show the whole thing again, but just so to make sure that everyone understands, now we are going to be doing 4 double crochets in between every increase and increasing in the 5th stitch, making this row 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5. We are going to continue doing this pattern until we get to the 12th row, which means that we're going to be putting 11 double crochets in between every single increase and increasing on the 12th stitch. So regular double crochets 1 through 11, and then we're doing 12, 12 is increase, increase. After the 12th row, we will be starting to kind of square off the spiral. So that's where I will meet you at the end of your 12th row of your second color, going into the 13th row of your first color. Going into the 13th row, we are going to start squaring off our project, but in this row, we're just going to be adding the 4 corners of the sweater. So before we begin, we are going to put a stitch marker in the place where we want our other corner to be for the white part or your first color. In between here and the end of this row where we would end just our first color, there are 5 increases, so we want our corner to be at the 3rd increase because that is the middle. So if you can find the 3rd increase from where we are, or it is 40 stitches from where we are right now, including where you have the stitch marker. So from here, 40 stitches, it's over here, and I used a different color stitch marker so that I know that this is different from our starting stitch markers. So again, here is where we're starting. I'm not counting this increase. So then there's 1 increase over here, and then there's another one over here, and then I put it on the 3rd one over here. Or just count 40 stitches from here to here and put your stitch marker in. So we're going to remove our stitch marker in the beginning, and this is where we're going to start 1 corner. So we are going to double crochet, chain 2, and then double crochet again into the same space. So it's still an increase, but we have chain 2 in between. At some point, it's going to not really be necessary to use stitch markers anymore because now we'll just be able to see the corners and we'll stop there. But I just continue using the stitch markers anyway. And now we are going to follow the pattern normally until we get to our 2nd stitch marker where we want to put our 2nd corner. So in this row, we are still going to be doing the other increases as well. So right now, I am just double crocheting once in all these stitches. And once I get to my first increase, I'm still going to increase regularly. Here it is, and we're going to double crochet twice in there. Once you get to the 2nd stitch marker, remove the stitch marker and make a corner like we did before. So a double crochet into that stitch, chain 2, and then a double crochet into that same stitch. And now we will just keep following the pattern again until we end this row and do the same thing with our 2nd color. Now that I'm at the start of my 2nd color, I'm going to do that again and find the place where I want to put the stitch marker. Here's the first increase, the second increase, and the third. And I'm going to put my stitch marker right here. And now I'm going to remove this stitch marker and do the same exact thing. Don't forget to make a corner at the very beginning. So double crochet, chain 2, and double crochet into that same spot. And if you want to, put your stitch marker back in. And keep doing the regular pattern that we've been following until we get to the stitch marker. And then we'll do our corner again. Here I am at the second stitch marker. We're gonna double crochet, chain 2, and double crochet again. That's gonna be the last place where we need a corner, of course, because there's only 4 corners in a square. And now I'll meet you at the end of row 13. Starting row 14 with our first color, we are going to keep up with the corners. So do a double crochet into the underneath of the corner, like underneath the chain 2, and then chain 2 again, and then do another double crochet into the corner. And then we can just keep going. I'm still going to put my stitch marker back, but I've been putting it in the chain 2 now. And double crochet up until your first increase. Okay, I've stopped right before my first increase. If anyone is wondering, I'm just going to count from the stitch after the corner. So here's the corner, the 2 stitches we made into a corner. I'm going to start counting from after the corner. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That was 13. And in the first stitch of the increase, we are going to half double crochet and not increase. We are not going to be increasing in any stitch from this point forward. So we are now going to half double crochet from this increase to the next increase. Half double crochet, just 1 half double crochet into every stitch. And now I'm at that increase, and I'm going to half double crochet one more time. And then in the second stitch of the increase, I will just go back to double crocheting. And we're going to double crochet until we get to the corner. We're going to keep up with the corner here as well. So the same thing as before, double crochet, chain 2, double crochet. And now we're going to go do the same thing that we just did starting from the first corner. We're going to double crochet until we get to our first increase. And we are not going to be increasing anymore. We are going to half double crochet into the first stitch of that increase, half double crochet in the next one, and keep doing half double crochets until we get to the other increase. And now, as always, we are going to do the same thing to our second color as we just did to our first color. So don't forget to keep up with the corners like I just did and to stop increasing. And I will meet you at the end of row 14. Starting row 15, we are going to do the corner. And after the corner, do 11 double crochets. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And after those 11, we're going to do 3 half double crochets. And from there, we are going to do 15 single crochets. And then we're going to do 3 half double crochets again. Oops, that was a double. And go all the way into the next corner with double crochets. Of course, at this corner, we are going to do the same thing. First, continue the corner. And then do 11 double crochets. And 3 half double crochets. And 15 single crochets. Three more half double crochets. And double crochet until we get to the second color. Of course, we are going to do that same exact thing to the second color for both of its corners. So I will meet you back at the end of row 15. Going into the 16th row with our first color, do the corner first as always. And we are going to double crochet 9 times. And we are going to half double crochet 3 times. And now single crochet, checking my notes, 22 times. And then half double crochet 3 times again, and double crochet until you get to the next corner. And of course, we are going to do that at every corner. It's 9 double crochets, then 3 half double crochets, then 22 single crochets, the 3 half double crochets again, and then double crochet until the next corner. Going into row 17, we are going to start with our corner. And we are going to double crochet 6 times after the corner. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we are going to half double crochet 3 times. And after the half double crochets, we are going to single crochet 30 times. Now we are going to half double crochet 3 times again and double crochet until the next corner. We are going to do that again at every corner. So that is starting with 6 double crochets, 3 half double crochets, 30 single crochets, then the 3 half double crochets again, and then double crochet until the next corner. Once you've done that to both your colors, now we're going into row 18, which is going to be the last row that we need to do all this counting. And if you're making a size small, that it is going to be your last row in general, but I'll talk more about sizes after we finish this row. So starting off with our corner, and then we are going to double crochet just 3 times. And we are going to half double crochet 6 times. Now we are going to single crochet 32 times. And after those single crochets, we are going to half double crochet 6 times again. Oops. And double crochet 3 times, or until the end of the row, or until you get to the corner, I mean. And do your next corner. And we're going to repeat that 3 more times for the rest of the corners. And that was 3 double crochets, 6 half double crochets, and 32 single crochets. So I will meet you at the end of row 18. I've finished that row with both my colors. If you're making a size small, you can stop here. I will have timestamps in the video so you can go straight to the shoulder part before you cut off any yarn. And for everyone that's making above a size small, you can just continue adding rows of just double crochet, no increases, no anything, double crochet into every stitch. And you can add 1 row per size. So if you're planning on making a medium, you would just have to add 1 row of double crochet in both of your colors. I am making an extra large, so I will be double crocheting into each stitch for 3 rows. Don't forget to keep doing your corners though. I've just done my first corner here, so I'm going to keep double crocheting, and then I will also put on the screen the inches that you want to aim for your size, and you will just measure that straight across the project, just the width from here to here. Just measure that and compare it to the size recommendations, because based on your tension or your hook size, it might not be exactly the same as what I'm doing. So even though I can just add 1 row per size, it might not be exactly the same for you. So you will want to double check by measuring the inches. Or you can also measure against a sweater that you already own and you know that you like the fit of. And if you're using acrylic yarn like I am, it is going to end up being very stretchy anyway. So you can size down if you want to, or if you end up being a size in between 2 sizes, then you can just leave it like that. Like if you're aiming for a size large and your measurements come out to be kind of in between a medium and a large, that would be fine because the project is going to stretch a lot. So I'm going to be double crocheting like this for my 3 rows for my extra large, and the rows are including both colors. We're still counting rows as just a full entire circle around, not from corner to corner. And once everyone has their desired size, then we will end the spiral and start a little bit of a shoulder part before we move on to the sleeves. Once you're at the end of your double crochet rows or wherever you ended for your size, we are going to end one color and use the other color to start making a shoulder part. It doesn't matter which color is which, but on your first panel and your second panel, you want it to be 2 opposite colors. So when I made my first panel, I started making the shoulder part out of orange. So now I'm going to end my orange on my second panel and use the white to create a shoulder part, because then when we sew the 2 panels together, they are not 2 of the same color next to each other, and so the pattern continues to go on. So to end the spiral, you're going to want to end about 6 stitches before the end, and you will just need to do 2 half double crochets, 2 single crochets, and 2 slip stitches. And then I also like to slip stitch into one of the chains from the corner. And that's it. We don't need this anymore, so we can cut off the yarn. Then when you're coming to the end of your other color, you will go to the corner. And then before, we're going to turn it, but before we keep crocheting, we are going to put in stitch markers where we want the neckline to be / where the shoulder part ends. So I put mine 18 stitches in from each corner. So you can start with that and then measure in between the two stitch markers. You're going to want it to be about 8 or 9 inches in between the stitch markers. So start off somewhere around 18, 19, 20, and then measure in between and move them as you need to get 8 or 9 inches. So now I'm going to double crochet until my stitch marker, and including the stitch that my stitch marker is on. And then we are just gonna chain one and cut off the yarn, and we're gonna do another row, but we need to do that in the other color so that the pattern still continues. So right now we're just gonna cut that off and do the same thing on the other side. I actually don't even turn it, I just slide it over and I'll start in this stitch where the stitch marker is, and then I will go all the way to the corner. So here I'm just going to chain 2 first to make it easy to do a double crochet, and then I'm going to double crochet in that same spot where I chained 2, and then double crochet over the tail that I just made. So I double crochet to the corner, and I'm going to do the same thing over here, cut off the yarn. And now I am going to turn my work so that I can crochet over these tails with my orange color. So now I'm going to attach my orange color and chain 2 and do the same thing, double crochet across and try to crochet over those tails. And then once you get to the end, we're only going to do 2 rows of shoulder part on each panel. And on at least one of your panels, you're going to want to leave a slightly longer tail right here so that you can sew the 2 panels together with that tail. I did do that on my first panel, so I'm not going to do it here, but you're going to want to pull the yarn out. It only has to be enough to sew along here, so it's not even as long as you think it is. Something like this would be good. So make sure to remember to do that on at least one panel on both sides of the shoulder part. Now you slide over so that we can finish the shoulder part with our last color and leave that long tail again on one of the panels. Once you've reached this point for both of your body panels, we can put them aside and start working on our sleeves. You're going to pick whichever color you want for the sleeve cuff. This is going to be a ribbed cuff. If anyone watching has used my tutorials before, I almost always do the sleeves the same way for every sweater that I make. So this is going to be that. You're going to want to leave a long tail in the beginning and at the end for sewing, but the one in the beginning has to be longer. I use my wingspan, so I'm doing that right now. And I have a pretty short wingspan, so if you use yours, you're good. You could put a hair clip on this to keep it all balled up if it's going to annoy you. And we are going to start by chaining 10. And then we are going to skip the loop that's closest to the hook, and we're going to do 9 single crochets across. Chain 1 and turn your work. Now we're going to be working in the back loop only to create the ribbing effect. So instead of single crocheting into the side of the stitch like normal, which would be like right here, we are looking at the top of the stitches and putting our hook right here. And this is the back loop, so we're just capturing the back loop. And that's going to be 9 times. Chain 1 and turn your work and do the same thing. Back loop only, single crochet 9 times. We are going to do this for 24 rows or until it fits comfortably around your wrist without any stretching or with minimal stretching. And I just want to quickly show how you count rows when you're doing ribbing in case you haven't done ribbing before. The raised part of the row or of the cuff is 1 row, and then the part like kind of underneath it is another row. This is 1 row and this is 1 row. And so if you just want to count the raised parts, you can count by 2s. Just make sure your long end is on the right side of you, because once you get to 24 rows or any even number of rows, it is going to be on the right side of you. And so if you're counting by 2s, that's the way to know that you have done a multiple of 2. So far I've done 2, 4, 6, 8 rows. Now that I've got my 24 rows, it fits around my wrist with just like barely any stretching. At the end of my 24th row, I chain 2, and now we're going to turn our work and work on the side. For every size sweater, we're going to be doing the sleeves exactly the same. The only difference is that I am now going up a quarter hook size, so now I'm using 5.25 millimeter. Before I was using 5.0. So if you're making a smaller or medium, you could stay at 5.0, and if you're making above a medium, you can go up a hook size. It won't make a huge difference, but I found that sleeves, as long as you're making them big and comfortable, it's gonna be pretty consistent for every size. It's nice to have room in your sleeves and end with a cuff that is a little tight around your wrist. Not tight, but form-fitting to your wrist. So that's what we're going to create right now. So we are turning and working on the side of our work, and we are going to be increasing every single stitch that we do. I know that working in the side is a little tricky a lot of times because you don't really know where to put stitches and you want to try to be like even and consistent. So I'm going to show you what I do. First, we're going to have a space right here underneath where we just did a single crochet. There's like a big post here from the single crochet, and we're going to double crochet twice into that. And then there's always these little holes that have just like 1 stitch at the top, and I go over those. I skip those. And then I will double crochet increase into the next spot I see right after that, and another spot next to that. So that's 4 stitches I've just done, 4 double crochets. And then I run into one of those holes again that just has the 1 stitch here. And that's where I know to just skip, and that's how I stay consistent. I will always put 2 double crochet increases in between those stitches that have the 1 string on the top. So there's always going to be at least 2 spaces that you can work into. We just need the 2. And don't forget to increase. There's an increase, and then there's a space right next to it. before we come across one of those stitches. I'll show it with a needle in case it's hard to see. This stitch right here is what we're skipping. And once we get to the end, there's one more space that we can squeeze into over here. And you're going to end up with double the amount of your rows. So we all did 24 rows. So we ended up with 48 stitches here. It's fine if you're not at exactly 48, as long as you're close to that, then that's good. And now to stay consistent with the pattern of the sweater, we are going to chain one and cut off the yarn and attach our other color. It's up to you if you want to do the single color rows or not here, because I know it's annoying to cut off yarn and reattach yarn every row. You could carry yarn if you want to, but I do think that the sweater looks best and just more consistent and nice if you do the single color rows on the sleeve. Like every other row you change the colors. So now I'm going to attach my white, chain two, and double crochet into that first stitch, and double crochet all the way across until we get to the last stitch. In the last stitch, we are going to be increasing in just that stitch. So when you get to the last stitch, don't cut off your yarn yet. Make sure you do an increase in there. I am now going into my last stitch, so I'm going to do that double crochet increase into that stitch and chain one and cut off my yarn. We are going to do the same thing for 2 more rows. So we are double crocheting into every stitch across the row, and then when you get to the last stitch, you are going to double crochet increase into the last stitch, just for 2 more rows. Once you have done those few rows of increasing in the last stitch, after that you can just double crochet across the whole entire row, no increases, just 1 double crochet in every stitch for the rest of the sleeve. So you should do about 24 to 26 rows, or more than that if you are tall and worried about sleeve length. I'm doing 24 on mine. That's about average. 24 to 26 is for like an average arm length. So you can do more if you think that you might have to, but also remember that the body panels are also going to take up space on your shoulders. So don't try to measure the length of your sleeve against the full length of your arm, because the sleeve does not need to be that long. And then at the end of all your rows, when you think that your sleeve is long enough, again, I'm doing 24 rows, then we are going to leave a long tail. It doesn't have to be quite as long as this one, which was our wingspan. It doesn't have to be as long as that, but just long enough for sewing purposes. I'm going to show that when I finish my sleeve, so I will meet you there. I've now finished my 24 rows and made this long tail, which is probably longer than I need. Always want to do that just in case. And once you have 2 sleeves and 2 body panels, we will begin sewing them together. So I won't be able to fit the whole thing in the frame, but you're going to want to put your shoulders together like this. And also be careful that the color that is on the side, like right here, it's ending with white on the side, is the opposite of what it's next to on the other panel. So over here, I ended with orange on this side. So you want the opposite colors touching each other so that the pattern still continues, just like what we did with the shoulder parts as well. And you're just going to take one of your long tails from one of your shoulder parts and use a needle to sew the shoulders together. So put them up next to each other and then just go back and forth. I don't do any type of fancy sewing. You can if you want to. I know that there's techniques where you don't really see the seam as much or you don't see the yarn that you're sewing with. I just do the basic because I'm not great at sewing. And once you get to the other side, you're just going to knot it. Since I ended next to an end, I'll just tie them together and I'm going to weave both of them in and then do that to the other shoulder part as well. Now we have this neckline and we are going to turn this on its side. Take one of your sleeves and fold it and put a stitch marker in about where it is the halfway point and then open it back up with your long tail on your right side or whatever side you're sewing with, and then attach the stitch marker into the middle of our shoulder parts where they're sewn together. And flatten everything out and lay it out nice and not stretched. Don't stretch it out, but just lay it naturally. And now we will take the needle and the long tail and line this up a little bit. It's okay if it's not perfect. And begin to sew. Once you get to the middle, you can just remove the stitch marker. It was just there to help us stay secure and on the right path to being even. And then you can just keep sewing until the end of the sleeve. And now that I'm at the end, I'm just going to knot my tail again and weave it in. As you can see, I did have a lot of extra tail. And now we are going to lift up and fold all of this so that we're kind of getting the real sweater shape and sleeve shape. So fold this in half so that it's like this, and then the rest of the sweater is the nice square shape. There we go. Now we are using our long tail from the beginning of the sleeve to sew up the side of the sleeve that is still open. So right here, we need to sew that together, and then we will keep sewing around the corner and down the side of the sweater. So we're using this one tail to sew both the sleeve shut and then the rest of the sweater on this side. And then we will do it again with the other sleeve on the other side. So we just start down here at the cuffs and begin sewing. At the corner here, I like to go around it a couple times to reinforce it like this. You don't want any holes in your armpit. There we go. And turning to sew down the side of the sweater now. At the end, you can knot your tail and weave it in. Actually, I'm going to weave it in this way to be underneath the orange because I'm using an orange tail. And look at that, it's starting to look like a sweater shape. You just need to do the same exact thing to the other sleeve to sew everything together. In between me filming this tutorial, yesterday I was at a market with one of my other spiral sweaters that was a size large, and a man tried it on, which I don't get a lot of men trying on my products. Well, I was really excited about that, and it fit him really nice, and I asked him if the sleeve length was good or if he needed longer, and he said that it was pretty good. So I was really happy about that because I don't get to test my sizes on men very often. Anyway, so after you sew on your other sleeve over here, all we have left to do is the neckline. Once you've sewn both arms on, before we do anything else, we're just going to turn it inside out. So now that the seams will be on the inside of the sweater. So I'm looking at our open neck hole right here. And now I can zoom in to show you guys up close what we're doing. So you can pick any spot around the entire circle to attach yarn. And the first thing that we're going to do is just single crochet all the way around. This way we'll have nice stitches to work into instead of working into the side, which we are going to do right now to make the single crochet. So I'm going to chain one. And I am starting on the side of my work, so just put stitches wherever you can. I'm probably going to do like 2 in every post of a color. Oh, sorry, let me bring it down. And then go to the next color. 1, 2. And then now I'm already at the side because I started in like the middle. I started in the middle of the side, now I'm at the front, I should say. Then when you get to the front, there's nice single crochets, or there's double crochets to already work into. And we're just going to single crochet all the way around until we get back to where we started and chained 1. Once you get back to where you started, you can just slip stitch into the chain 1 or the first single crochet because it probably is tight in there, so either one. And then we're going to start the ribbing. So we are going to chain 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Chain is going to be the length of your ribbed neckline. So if you want an even bigger ribbed neckline that like goes higher up on your neck, then you can chain more than 7. Or if you want a really short one, sometimes I only chain 6. And now we're going to single crochet down that chain. So that's going to end up being 6 single crochets because you don't crochet into the chain that's closest to the hook. 1, 2, 3, 4, oops, 5, 6, and then you're gonna slip stitch into 3 stitches after that. 1, 2, 3, and you're gonna turn your work. It gets a little annoying to turn an entire sweater around. And you're going to single crochet back up this chain of 6, and it can get hard to see which of these stitches is the slip stitches we've just done and which are the single crochets that we're crocheting back into. So I like to count from the top because we know we're doing 6. So I count from 6 from the top. And now we're going to single crochet back loop only up those 6 stitches. Back loop is what gives us the ribbing effect. Oops. Chain 1 and turn. And we are going to single crochet back loop only back down the 6 stitches. Oops. That's 6. And we are going to slip stitch into the next 3 stitches. I'm going to come as close as I can to show that we don't slip stitch into this one because we are already in this one. Let me get my needle to show it. So we are already inside of this stitch. We're just leaning a lot towards the right, so it could be hard to see. So we're going to slip stitch into 1, 2, and 3. There we go. 1, 2, oops. There we go. 3. And we're going to turn and go back up the 6 single crochet. So I count from the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that's where we are going into to single crochet back loop only, back up the top. Chain 1, turn, and just keep doing that same thing. 6 single crochet, back loop only, back down. 4, 5, 6. Slip stitch into the next 3, not the one that's closest to the hook because we're already in that. And then turn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And single crochet, back loop only. We're going to be doing this all the way around. If it starts to get too tight of a neckline or you don't like how small it's getting, then you could only slip stitch into 2, or you could alternate every other row. Slip stitch into 2, and then when you're back at the bottom, slip stitch into 3 on the next one, like right here, 1, and then you could just do 2 and turn your work. I think right now 3 is fine, but sometimes your measurements are a little off and it starts to get too tight. So instead of redoing the whole thing, you could like just start to do that. I'm going to do this all the way around until I get back to here where we started, and I will meet you there. Once I get to the end, I only have 2 stitches that I can slip stitch into, so I'm just going to do 2. And I'm going to go back up one more time after that. Chain 2 and put the 2 ends of the collar together. I chained 2 so that we have the extra room to go around and put our hook into the first stitch over here, and then the first stitch of the one we're already attached to, and slip stitch to attach these 2 ends of the collar. Slip stitch all the way down. I just do like a little bit of extra even though I've already done the 6 stitches, and then chain 1 and cut off the yarn. We're going to weave in this end and then we are finished with our sweater. I hope you found this tutorial helpful, and as always, you can leave questions in the comments. I also always link my crochet Instagram account in the description in case you want to message me a question, or if you want to tag me on Instagram if you post your final result. Thanks for watching.